Good morning, everyone. Just get myself set up. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, David. Okay, let's get started. So the expectations of an inspector. So why was the Welding Initiative launched back in 2023? Firstly, as part of our corporate plan for the period 2018 to 2023, it was agreed that workplace health should receive the same recognition in the work environment as occupational safety, and therefore the commitment was made to focus on occupational health priorities, raise awareness and take appropriate enforcement action where necessary. This too further supported the vision of the Workplace Health Leadership Group, which was formed in 2016 to ensure that effective occupational health management was being given the priority in Northern Ireland workplaces that it warranted. Secondly, and already touched on earlier by both Ken and David, as a result of the reclassification of IARC. And thirdly, as a result of this reclassification, the standard industry practice of using general ventilation and RPE to control welding fume would no longer be deemed acceptable. The overriding health and safety legislation in relation to controlling welding fume is the control of substances hazardous to health, and in particular, Regulation 7, which requires every employer to ensure that the exposure of his employees to substances hazardous to health is either prevented or, where this is not reasonably practicable, adequately controlled. I have no doubt that you're familiar with the pyramid of risk control, and as demonstrated on the diagram, the most effective approach at the top of the pyramid is to physically remove the hazardous substance, whilst at the other end of the pyramid, and only to be used as a last resort, is the use of PPE and RPE. However, given the status of welding fume as a Group 1 carcinogen, a higher standard of control is now needed where the health effects arising from exposure are more serious. Therefore, employers should continue to reduce exposure to as low as is reasonably practicable. Reasonably practicable means weighing the risks against the trouble, time and money needed to control it. This is all great in theory, I hear you say, but how or what does the hierarchy look like in practice in terms of controlling welding fume? Let's take a look at some practical considerations for companies when implementing the hierarchy of control. If we look at the top of the table, elimination, can the job be redesigned so that there's less need to weld, or can the process be eliminated completely? Next, we have substitution. Can companies swap from using, for example, stick welding, which generates the most fume, to a process which generates much less fume, for example, MIG or TIG welding? Or indeed, can cleaner types of rods or wire be used? The next level, we have process change. Can the process be automated? During visits, we have noticed the use of robotic welding and CNC cutting on the increase. With a bit better planning, can the use of jigs and rigs be used to better position the workpiece? Does the workpiece need grease or rust removed? Is there surface coatings or debris which could be cleaned down prior to welding? And is it possible to automate the process and have it enclosed, for example? Now, it's important to highlight those top three controls. It may be highly unlikely that these can be implemented, and therefore the installation of LEV must be considered. So what does local exhaust ventilation look like? Fixed and static LEV systems come with extraction units, hoses, hoods, which are fixed in one place, which come with movable fume capture hoods on a flexible extraction arm. Mobile LEV systems have the same components as fixed and static systems. The only difference is they come in wheels, which are great for transporting around the workplace. Next, we have on tool, on torch, on gun extraction. This is a type of LEV which is fitted directly onto tools and equipment. Some manufacturers and suppliers provide complete harmonised systems, but parts from different makes and models can be used together, providing that they are compatible. However, there needs to be a discussion beforehand between all parties to agree the compatibility of the system. Next, we have what's called downdraft benches, where air is extracted downward. typically passing through holes or slots on the downdraft bench. The photo on the screen shows a welder stick welding with an effective welding bench. Important though to point out that suitable RPA is also required where residual fume has been identified. Now, having looked at the different types of LEV, it's also important to go back and have a look and say, can fume be extracted by general ventilation? The answer is no. It is no longer deemed sufficient to rely upon general ventilation and RPA. The use of mechanical wall or roof fans and push-pull systems can be effective in combination with other controls to managing this residual fume. However, these alone cannot be relied upon to adequately control welding fume at source. Going back to the table, next we have administrative control and work practices. Can a dedicated area for welding with restricted access be used in order to reduce the number of workers being exposed to welding fume? Or is it feasible to construct a new build to achieve this? In addition to the correct use of equipment, to minimise fume production and exposure, training is also necessary in the use and the maintenance of the LEV system and the RPA being provided to employees. Last but not least on the table, we have RPA. Categorised as the least effective in the hierarchy of control, RPA should only be used as a last resort and when residual fume has been identified as part of your risk assessment process. Important to note that using a powered respirator when a welder is required to carry out welding for 1 hour, or alternatively, a disposable FFP3 mask can also be worn up to 1 hour. So hopefully you have a better idea of what our expectations of control at source are. However, this shouldn't be news to you. As in advance of the launch, we had developed and prepared a number of tools and resources providing companies support and information about the requirements prior to inspections taking place. In April 2022, our communications team issued a press release advertising the initiative. A number of social media posts were shared and a topic page was developed on our website. In collaboration with the HSE, BOHS, HSL Lab in Buxton, local colleges and industry, a series of 6 videos incorporating safety in welding and examples of suitable control were also made available on our website. A welding survey was conducted and circulated, drawing duty holders' attention to the reclassification and change in expectations of control, but also to require some information and status of the current controls already out there in industry. And interestingly, a measure of the Prelaunch survey being circulated revealed that out of 220 responses received, 65% of the companies indicated that they were aware of the recent classification. However, providing the advice and guidance is just one of the roles of what HSENI do. Also required, we take appropriate enforcement action where compliance has not been achieved. Between the months of May 2022 and January 23, a total of 312 premises were visited by the manufacturing team. As a result of the initiative, whilst a number of premises had adequate controls in place, as you can see from the statistics, enforcement action was required and a total of 136 improvement notices were served to achieve compliance. These notices ranged from 77% with no control at source in place whatsoever to 18.5% of thorough examination and tests for the LEV systems not being conducted, to 4.5% where no suitable RPA had been provided. So this indicated to us that most premises were still relying on RPA and general ventilation as their primary control measures for managing the welding fume. The fact that 77% of premises did not have adequate control at source in place indicated to us that achieving compliance would not be an easy overnight fix. As the initiative progressed, inspectors became more aware that each workplace faced their own unique challenges and that achieving compliance and that finding the right solution would take time. That being said, a total of 68% of notices served have been complied with to date, with the remaining 32% of companies working steadily towards compliance. Common issues raised during the inspections and noted by the inspectors. The layout. Have you considered the availability of space? For example, if welders are working in welding bays, there may not be sufficient space for more units, and therefore you may need to go for wall-mounted type. Manual handling considerations, for example, weight implications of systems requiring jigs or brackets, and longer hoses should also be noted. Is the structural fabrication of the building suitable? For example, for fixed systems, do you need to work around cranes that are already installed? The likelihood is, where cranes are in place, there may already be the required structural support and stanchions to facilitate a static LEV system. Have new risks been introduced where, for example, extra cables, hoses and equipment are needed? To eliminate slips, trips and falls, is the underground laying of cables, relocating of cables at height feasible? In order to meet supply and demand of the product being manufactured, you may also have to consider that there's a requirement to modify or upgrade your current power supply. Products. The size, the shape and consistency of product type being welded may vary from day to day, resulting in different types of extraction being required for each specific product. Mobility is already touched on. If working on larger workpieces, you may require more mobility and access into corners, or you may be working on smaller items like bench or static work. Similarly, if you're working at height, this may limit the number of extraction options available to you. For example, the application of magnetic accessories on mobile LEV can offer flexibility to the welder. However, inspectors are aware that where such engineering controls are not reasonably practicable, the next level of the hierarchy of control must be applied to ensure adequate controls are implemented. Tacking. It has been noted during our inspections, and whilst we appreciate that not all of your welders shall be welding for the full duration of their shift, it is important to be aware that they will be exposed accumulatively, and therefore the requirements of COSH still apply. And is also noted in the HSE WL3 guidance document that any regular welding at any intensity requires LEV. Administrative factors. Have you researched the type of equipment and systems that are available out there? Have you consulted with designers? It is important to ensure that you include a range of tasks and products when trialling any equipment, and that appropriate time is allowed to assess the suitability. You really need to give it a chance. Lead times for delivery and installation, timescales for the system may change over time, and these may be out of your control. Is the availability of parts, consumables and equipment, that is, what supply stocks do your suppliers have? Are they waiting on shipments arriving? What is the availability of competent advice, namely designers, engineers, examiners, installers and commissioners? We're fully aware the cost implications of this initiative. However, this will require financial planning from an early stage. To date, HSENI are not aware of any grants or financial support to assist companies in meeting this requirement. It has also been brought to our attention during inspection that some companies have experienced pushback from employees in relation to implementing the new controls. With the demand for welders so high at present, companies have expressed concern about welders threatening to leave for as little as 20p an hour if controls and how they work currently are being changed. We want to say that this initiative applies to all engineering premises throughout the province, and where non-compliant companies are identified, appropriate action shall be taken. Therefore, employee buy-in is inevitable. Ineffective systems. We have witnessed many DIY jobs where companies have hastily modified or installed systems themselves without proper research, guidance and competent advice in line with HSG document 258. which is a document that describes the principles of deciding on, designing, commissioning and testing effective LEV. A frequent observation during inspection was that the LEV system, typically overhead arms or mobile extractions, were not positioned correctly. Movable hoods should be positioned within a hood's diameter of the welding point in order to collect the fume effectively. Otherwise, this will not capture the welding fume. The importance of the regular reposition of capture hoods to maintain the optimal fume capture cannot be emphasised enough. Is the system underperforming? This can be for a number of reasons. However, a key consideration is adequate and ongoing maintenance of the system. For example, failure to carry out pre-use checks, conduct regular inspections of the system, conduct statutory 14-monthly examination and tests, replacing filters. These all can lead to poor performance. Is the system that you have chosen the right type of extraction for your needs? For example, on-torch extraction works most effectively for downward welding on flat surfaces as opposed to overhead positioning of the torch. And hearsay. Have you rushed in to ban off-the-shelf equipment or thought you were getting a bargain purchasing second-hand systems without proper consideration of all the options, including the bespoke system specific to your workplace? The aim is to select from the most reliable control options. It is important not to be too fixed in one's thinking. You may have based your decisions on rumours or second-hand information, which has no substance. In many cases, an effective set of control measures will turn out to be a mix of options, some more reliable than others. So, keys to success and achieving compliance. Project management. Ideally, you want to select a project team who have a mixture of knowledge, skills and experience from all levels of the business. Realistic targets need to be set and a programme of works devised to monitor the progress. Researching the best available technology on the market will save time and money and enable you to set a realistic expenditure with some flexibility. Risk assessment. This needs to be suitable, sufficient and task specific. All welding processes should be reviewed, including any robotic, plasma or automated welding. Specialist advice. For all proposed LEV systems, an LEV specification should be produced and a competent LEV engineer, installer engaged. A competent contractor should be engaged, preferably P601 or 602 qualified. So quotes and trialling. Give it a chance. There's no point trialling, for example, on torch for a couple of hours. You need sufficient time scale for welders to really experience the handling and the use of the equipment. Trial a selection of different types of on-torch. For example, slimmer tipped torches can be less heavy, and with the continuing development of on-torch, it is important you know your supplier can provide you with the most up-to-date range of technology available. A range of tasks. Rigorously test the applications for the various types of LEV across the range of products you manufacture. See what works best for you. Select a range of welders from the shop floor who have a different level of experience, physical capabilities and skill sets in order to collate valuable feedback. It is imperative to ensure that persons participating in the trials have a willingness to accept change and to use the trialling exercise as a means of identifying the most suitable and practicable form of extraction out of the available options. Feedback and consultation. The project team should be made responsible for collating the feedbacks, both good and bad. These are necessary to establish which is the most preferred options for usability, cost effectiveness, energy effectiveness, and overall running costs, including the maintenance and ongoing compliance. Some companies have tried to convince us that on-torch affects the quality of the weld, and it's totally useless. Don't listen to second-hand information. You really do need to try it out for yourself. Networking. A number of companies who have achieved compliance have an open door policy. get a visit to these premises. Share ideas. Some of you may be members of certain engineering groups or accreditation bodies, for example the Northern Ireland Safety Group and Manufacturing NI. Use these platforms to acquire knowledge, guidance and good practice. Get talking. Use today as an opportunity to get talking. Members of the Manufacturing, Occupational Health and Scientific Services team are available during the morning break and at lunchtime. Also to answer questions at the Q&A session at 12:45. To conclude, during our initiative, inspectors observed for the majority of premises visited that one type of LEV was not enough to effectively control welding fume. What we have learnt is an effective set of control measures required to manage welding fume will turn out to be a mix of options, some more reliable than others. Fortunately, we have Ian McElveen from Heister Yale Group, who's up next, who will provide us with a flavour of what this mix of options might look like as he shares their journey towards achieving compliance with you.